generation needs a revolution, Jimmy. The American dream is just that. Just a dream. War is a continuation of politics, only by other means. Politics is a continuation of economics by other means. This is our bank. This is our war. And this is our plan of attack.
Banks have become an essential threat to our democracy. So consider this justice.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported radio station on the internet. Please help support this station so this battle can continue forward. Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Barbara Jean Lindsey is an internationally acclaimed psychic, spiritual healer, author, and founder of the online mystery school, Esoteric University. As the Cosmic Oracle, she is a conduit to the powers that be to answer your questions about your future self, past lives, current career, love. She shines light into the darkness to illuminate what was, what may be, and beyond. The readings and advice given by Barbara Jean Lindsey are for entertainment purposes only, should not take the place of any medical, legal, or financial advice given to you by a qualified professional, and are not a substitute for medical, legal, or financial advice. If you need a doctor, call a doctor. If you need to be expanded, call the Cosmic Oracle.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cosmic Oracle Show. This is your host, Barbara Jean Lindsey. I am having some technical difficulties today. The station seems to kind of fade in and out, and I've been having a little trouble with a whole bunch of different things. It seems like I have the internet, and then it'll drop all of a sudden. So bear with me tonight. I'm going to ask that the spirits come with us and help guide us through this evening, because it's already a wild ride just to get here. Okay, it is March 30th, Friday, 2018. I'm coming to you live from LA. Oh, not from LA. I'm not in LA. I'm in Northern California. So I'm coming to you live this evening from Northern California, just outside of the great capital of California, Sacramento. And we do have a guest. I'm very excited to welcome him to the show. He'll be coming on shortly, and that is retired Captain Dean WEBER, a American Airline, if I remember right, airline pilot for many years, over 25 years. We'll let him fill you in if those numbers aren't exactly right. But I want to talk to you about something that I found important this week that just happened. A little bit of disclosure may be going on with pilots reporting close encounters with a UFO over Arizona. And they say they have it on air that something just passed over us. And so I thought, hey, if the pilots from Arizona, federal aviation pilots, say there was maybe a possible UFO overhead. It's an interesting story. And I thought, well, what better than to get a perspective from an airline pilot? And so I think you'll find Dean really has a lot of wisdom and a lot of experience, and I think we'll have a very stimulating conversation. Before I bring him on, though, I would like to thank all listeners who have contributed to Revolution Radio over the years. We still need your help to keep us on the air. And all you have to do, we keep it really simple, is just go to freedomslips.com and Revolution Radio, and you'll see a donate button, there's a new button there too. It's I forget what it's called. I can't pull it up right now. Usually I pull it up, but you'll see it. Funding. Yes, it's a funding button, and just push that funding button if you could and donate. It's really simple. It doesn't take much of your time, and know that we are one of the largest internet radio stations in the world that is 100% listener-supported station. And what that means is that every dollar that you donate goes directly into keeping this station on the air, as we are an all-volunteer station. And so that means that no one gets paid for their services. And so that gives us freedom to do and talk what we would like here, freedom of choice and freedom of the topics that we find important to share with you, the listeners. So you, the listeners, are a major part of our continued success at getting the truth out. So please donate, keep us on the air. Go to freedomslips.com. Donate whatever you can afford. There's no amount too small or too large, and we truly appreciate your continued support. So far this month, we've raised $2,140. We're almost to the end, folks, and we need $2,650 just to keep us on the air. So we do have only a few days to go to raise just that last part of the money that we need to keep us on the air. So please give generously. Thank you in advance. And so now on with the show. So, okay, what I was talking about earlier is that I just happened to be online, and I got it on different sources, CBS News, I know, and it's, and a couple other sources online. So I think my sister was watching AOL.com, and she said, Barbara, come in the room. You got to hear this. And so it is a form of disclosure, and it's when two airline pilots. So I'll back up. Okay. So part of what we do here on the Cosmic Oracle Show, it's a place where we can talk about this sort of thing, and we can also tell our stories, our personal experiences. That's a major part of the Cosmic Oracle Show. And so I like to give you stories, so it'll help inspire you if you have a story to come forward and tell a story. You can call into show and tell a story, or you can contact me on the Cosmic Oracle Show on Facebook, or leave a comment on BarbaraJeanLindsey.com. And there's all sorts of ways and places where you can leave a close encounter story that you might have yourself. And by you telling your story, then it gives other people the openness, hopefully, to open their minds so they can tell their stories as well. So it becomes more mainstream. That's the idea, okay? So this particular story that I read was about two pilots on different aircraft reported having close encounters with a mysterious object flying high above Arizona last month. This was on February 24th, and this is according to the Federal Aviation Administration. The sightings occurred within minutes of each other, and they were some 40,000 feet above the southern Arizona near the New Mexico border. And I have a audio recording I'm going to try and play later for you. Cross your fingers, hope it works, so I can just take you right to it. And so the audio recording was first reported by the War Zone, which is part of Time Inc.'s The Drive. So it's about the news comes amid a series of reports and contacts which they believe to be UFOs. And so we'll see. And so now it's a part of a disclosure of a secret, but a now quote unquote defunct Pentagon program to track such incidents. But the pilot of a Learjet belonging to Phoenix Air with the tail number N71PG reported the initial sighting. And he asked the controller, was anybody above us that passed us like 30 seconds ago? Negative, controller responds. Okay, somebody did, the Learjet pilot says. It's a UFO, another pilot chimes in. Yeah, the Learjet pilot laughs, okay? A few minutes later, the controller radios to American Airlines Flight 1095 and Airbus A321, and he asks the pilot, let me know if you see anything pass over you here in the next 15 miles. Well, the pilot seems puzzled and responds, if anything passes over us, right? He's going, what? What's up? Affirmative. We had an aircraft in front of you at 37,000 feet that reported something passed over him, and we didn't have any radar targets. So just let me know if you see anything pass over you. This is what the controller says. All right, says the pilot. So the Learjet pilot joins the conversation saying, I don't know what it was. It wasn't an airplane, but it was. The path was going in the opposite direction. About a minute later, the American Airlines Flight 1095 pilot radios back to the controller to report a bizarre sighting in Arizona's airspace. Yeah, something just passed over us like I don't know what it was, but it was at least 3,000 feet above us. Yeah, it passed right over the top of us, the pilot says. Okay, American 1095, thank you, the controller responds. And the controller later asks, American 1095, can you tell if it was in motion or just hovering? This is the part I think is interesting. Couldn't make it out whether it was a balloon or whatnot. You know, that's in reference to the 1947 Roswell crash when they said it was a weather balloon. Of course, it wasn't a UFO, right? And still, that's one of the bigger stories. But it was just really beaming light, or could have had a big reflection and was several thousand feet above us going opposite directions, the pilot says. Roger, the controller responds. So the American airline pilot later radios to the controller again, asking if the unidentified object was a Google balloon. Doubtful, another pilot chimes in. And the voice of another pilot adds UFO, unidentified flying object. The controller was unable to verify that any other aircraft was in the area at the time of the reported sightings, according to a spokesperson for the FAA. We have a close working relationship with a number of other agencies and safely handle military aircraft and civilian aircraft of all types in that area every day, including high-altitude weather balloons, the spokesperson told ABC News in an email. So let's see, and it goes on to talk about it. So I thought, the part where he said it was shining and reflective, I think that's important. The captain said he often sees balloons or airships at these flight levels, but a beam of light shining off the object was so bright that he couldn't decipher whether that's what it was, according to Tracy. He said the only thing that was different about this was it was just so bright. The glare was so intense they couldn't make it out. So, Tracy said the captain described the sighting as rather uneventful, but he did notify air traffic control because he was concerned the object could hit other aircraft. He said when he landed, he didn't give it much thought. But I thought we should bring in a pilot, okay? Doesn't that sound like fun? Let's get like a real perspective of really what was going down here. And I want the truth, okay? I'm not invested either way, but I just want the truth. So we're going to give my friend, Dean Weber, a call. And I'll tell you a little bit about him, too, before we go on. Maybe I'll let him just introduce himself, too. So let's go ahead and let me see if I can pull him in here. Dean Weber. Let's add him to the call. Add to the call. Hey, it seems to all be working now. Hello, Dean. Welcome to the show. Hello? Okay, let's see. Hello, Dean, can you hear us? There you are.
I can't, yes.
There you are. It's really acting up today. Everything's really ultra slow. But I do hear you now. Can you hear us?
I can hear you fine now. Thanks for having me on again, Barbara. I appreciate it.
Oh, fantastic. I know it's been a couple years, hasn't it?
It has.
It has. So I guess what we're going to do here, Dean, and for our listeners, we're going to just kind of kick back and take it a little bit slower because I've had some coffee. My daughter brought me an Americano. And so, but the station itself and the energy of the station is slow. So I'm going to just kick back and pull my energy way back, and we're going to slow things down a little bit because that's kind of what's happening with my internet connection right now. Sound like a plan?
It does because, I live kind of out in the boonies, and so I'm relegated to using a satellite for my internet connection. So sometimes it's not the speediest as well. So if we go nice and slow, that'll be good for both of us.
Okay, so we're going to take it nice and easy. All right. Well, I'm so glad we're working this. And Dean is so gracious. I left him a message at 1:00 in the morning this morning, I think it was, saying, hey, I really want to talk about this sighting on my show. And I really wanted a retired captain perspective, an airline pilot. And so he was gracious enough to drop everything and come on the show. And so we really appreciate having you here, Dean.
My pleasure.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background as an airline pilot, maybe how you got there, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Well, I'm kind of an old timer. I graduated from college in 1971 with a degree in aeronautical engineering. And of course, the Vietnam War was still ongoing at the time. So I was forced into military service and went into the Air Force, into pilot training. And so then I ended up being a Vietnam era pilot in the Air Force for 6 years. And then when I decided to get out off active duty, I went back to work for the Boeing company in Seattle as aeronautical, as I was trying to get hired with the airlines. And I finally accomplished that in 1981. I spent about 27 years as a pilot, and 21 of those in the left seat as a captain. And during my career, I retired with approximately 25,000 hours of flight. So that's kind of where I got my experience in aviation. And of course, in the meantime, I was also flying a lot of light airplanes and doing instruction in that, and just dabbling in the whole aircraft industry for the last 50 some years. So that's my background.
I like one of your stories. Yeah. I remember reading one of your stories where you wanted to be, when you were a kid, you would fly around like you were Superman, or so you're always like, ever since you were a little boy, you wanted to be in the air.
Exactly. I used to have dreams about being able to fly, with just my arms as wings and all of that. And at the time it was just kind of fantasy. And then I had an older brother who was in the Air Force as an enlisted man, and he was a crew chief stationed up in Spokane at Fairchild Air Force Base, and he was a crew chief on the B-52 bomber at the time. And we came up for a visit with him. I lived in northeastern Oregon at the time, and he got us onto the base and got us. He was able to take us on a personal tour of the inside of a B-52. And as a 10-year-old boy, I was awestruck, and I knew from that day on exactly what I was going to do for a living, which was a flyer.
It was over from there,
and I was
from that moment.
Yeah, I was able to do that. I've read some statistics that only 5 to 10% of the people really enjoy what they're doing. Most of them are doing it because they have to for a paycheck or whatever. I just happened to hit onto a career. I was actually able to get there and do it, a job that I love to do. There were even times when I'd leave to go for a trip, and I'd be all excited because I got to go fly. And my wife was like, "Well, wouldn't you rather stay home with me?" And it's like, "Well, honey, I love you, but I got to go fly airplanes." So love doing that.
Well, and then to take on such a responsibility as a captain for all those years, that's huge. That's a huge responsibility.
Well, it is. And most people that get to that position, I don't know that the general public really understands all of the training and the checking that goes on in allowing you at a major airline to upgrade to that position as a captain, because you're responsible for everybody. I mean, you're the babysitter. You coordinate everything on that airplane, whether it's on the ground or in the air, and you're responsible for it. You literally sign for it in the logbook and in the flight plan. Before you even get to the airplane, you're responsible for the safe conduct of that flight. And so everybody that I know that ever made it to the left seat at a major airline, they take that responsibility very seriously. And it was an honor to by all those years, and I can say I never bent a piece of metal by doing that I shouldn't be doing, or did something incorrectly, or never got anybody hurt, that was anywhere remotely connected to being my fault as a decision maker on the airplane. So it was an honor to do that, and a lot of fun on top of it. So the captain gets to set the mood.
Well, we're going to let you set the mood on tonight's show too. Okay, so you had an impeccable, distinguished history as a pilot, and we will talk about later your book, and that's why I had you initially on the show, that you wrote a book of your perspective, an airline pilot's perspective. It's actually titled 9/11, an airline pilot's perspective, and that's by Captain Retired Dean Weber, and that's DEAN WEBER, and it is available on Amazon.com. And I really endorse this and endorse your editor, Ronnie Renee, if you're listening. We were talking about you earlier, Dean and I, and how you were instrumental in helping write our books. And so I do encourage you to buy Dean's book, and we will talk about that. But we want to talk about, I'll leave it up to you. Do we want to talk first about this Air Pilots Report Close Encounters, or do we want to talk about some of your personal experiences as well? Should we start with that and then go to the pilots, or do you want to go to the pilot first? What sounds good to you, Dean?
Let's listen to the pilot so your audience can listen to that, and then I'll comments about that, and then we can get into my own personal experience.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
All right, so I'm going to see if I can play this. Let's hope that I can, okay? And because of all this stuff that's kind of been happening. So cross your fingers, and we're going to give it a shot. All right, here we go. Let's back this up here, and I don't know, let's just start it. Can you hear that?
I'm not hearing anything, no.
Okay, let's try it again. Try
this. UFO. American 1095, let me know if you see anything pass over you here in the next 15 miles. You know if anything passes over? American 1095, affirmative. We had an aircraft in front of you. It's 37 that reported something passed over him, and we didn't have any targets. So just let me know if you see anything pass over you. I don't know what it was. It wasn't an airplane, but the path was going the opposite direction. Hey, it's American 1095. Yeah, something just passed over. Like don't know what it was, but it's at least 3,000 feet above us. So yeah, it passed right over the top of us. Okay, American 1095, thank you. Yeah, center Delta 1755, checking in 320. And Delta 1755, Albuquerque Center. American 1095, can you tell if it was in motion or just hovering? Make it out whether it was a balloon or whatnot, but it was just really big flight or had a big reflection on it, several thousand feet above us, going opposite directions. Okay, Roger. American 535, cross Tucson at a maintain flight level 260. Cross Tucson, flight level 260, American 535. American 1618, climb and maintain flight level 330. Climb and maintain flight level 330, American 1618. Was it a Google balloon? UFO.
All right. Did you hear that okay? Were you able to hear that, Dean?
Yes, I was.
Okay, great. Great. All right. So where does this take us? I'm gonna see if I can plug this back in and see if we're back on this way. Let's try this. Just a second. Okay. Can you hear me now? Fantastic.
I can hear you.
There. All right. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, that's what got me excited, and I posted it, and I had a whole bunch of people talking about it, and so that's one of the reasons why you're here today. Is what do you think about that from your perspective, from all the hours that you put in, and being responsible? I mean, to everything's being recorded, and let's talk about that. So you have the floor, Dean.
Okay. Yep. Everybody's pretty cautious about what they say on the radio because you don't want to subject yourself to any kind of ridicule from anybody down the road. But there's seen some strange things, and I used to fly a lot between the Dallas-Fort Worth airport and to Phoenix and Albuquerque and even up to the Portland, Seattle, Denver, and like that. And so you're going through this airspace that's controlled by, it's called the Albuquerque Air Traffic Control Center. And I've seen a lot of sightings in New Mexico because they do daily release a weather balloon there that does go up to those altitudes. And I've seen those fly in, and I suppose it's possible that if the sun was hitting just right off it, it could reflect and look like something other than a weather balloon. The DEA also has some lower altitude ones. They're down around 20,000 feet that actually have downward-looking radar that look for people coming, flying airplanes across the border in that low altitude. But when you go by like a weather balloon, it can be kind of deceptive because it almost looks like it's moving opposite to you. I mean, you're doing like 500 miles an hour, and that may be stationary or going above. Your brain's perception of what you're seeing may look like it's actually moving in the opposite direction. That's a possibility, but I've seen some other things that are just inexplainable. And so I wouldn't rule out anything,
At this
it
point.
very well could have been. Yeah, at this point, you really can't rule anything out. In fact, I was living in Scottsdale, Arizona when the infamous triangular-shaped lights flew over evening time over the western part of Phoenix and close by was even reported by the air traffic controllers at the Phoenix Tower, and hundreds or thousands of people witnessed this thing that was like a triangular shape about a mile in diameter that actually blocked out stars and other stuff in the background as it flew over and made absolutely no sound. And there never was a logical explanation for that. So I will say that my years in the military, I was exposed to some information as when I worked in the intelligence community. We have a lot of back ops programs that the government keeps secret from us for years, if not decades. Is it something like that, or is it a UFO? Just inexplicable almost. And I guess this would kind of fall into that range. We know these two pilots, a Learjet pilot and American Airlines captain, are not shouldn't be subject to question authenticity and what they say they saw. I mean, just based on all the years of experience they had. So
do you think he took a risk by? Do you think he took a risk by saying UFO? Is that a big risk for him to say that?
See, the American guy never said UFO. There was somebody else that keyed their mic and said, "Oh, it was a UFO." But the American guy just said he saw it. So somebody else chimed in and didn't identify themselves. They said, "Oh, that was a UFO." So guys are very cautious about saying something like that, just because you don't want the news media going to your company and says, "Well, geez, the captain on this, said, UFO, is there something wrong with him?"
But don't you think we have time to dispel that? I mean, like, the truth is the truth is the truth. If you see something that it's extraordinary or out of the ordinary, that has a basis of let's talk about it as well. But you're saying maybe for the safety of the people, or whatever the reason, maybe we'll never know, like you said, but that they do release a disclosure. And so also on this, that they actually are letting us hear it. Do you know what I mean? I guess the pilots they actually put it, it's like disclosure to me in a way, because they let us hear it. I don't know, because you probably are things like this all the time, and why this specific one? There has to be something to it, or that's what I thought.
Actually, I think most of those recordings would probably be available if you knew a specific recording to ask for through the Freedom of Information Act. Everything that the air traffic controllers talk about on the radio, that's all recorded and sent. That information would be available if you knew to go ask for it. That's the whole key. Somebody had to say, "Hey, this would really be a good story," and they probably keyed ABC or whoever did the initial report on this, and so they went to the FAA and said, "Hey, we want these tapes," and so they would release them. That happens all the time. In fact, around most major metropolitan areas, the local news media, they tape record all of the tower transmission at every major airport, because if there's an accident, they want to instantly be able to go review the tapes and what was said to that airplane and what that airplane was saying to them. They tape record the messages all the time. I've found that out early in my career. Said some things that I probably shouldn't have over the radio, and then the next day I opened up the newspaper and I was not my name, but I was quoted as saying something.
Let's hear. Okay, Dean. Let's hear one of those stories. Tell us one of those stories. Can you share with us, since you're retired?
Well, yeah. This was let me tell you a short story about saying something I wish I wouldn't have said on the radio, and then I'll tell you about my UFO encounter in Mexico.
I would love that.
This story,
I'm sure
I
our
was flying.
listeners would love it.
Okay, you want me to just go into the Mexico story?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay.
We were talking about that earlier.
Okay. Yeah. So I was on a trip down to a resort area. It's about 130 miles southeast of Acapulco on the west coast. It's called Bahia de Huatulco. And it's a beautiful resort area. And we were flying back to the U.S. and flying along. We were on the jet route. A jet route is kind of like a highway in the sky that we follow from navigation point to navigation point. So the air traffic controllers can assign us a route to fly, and they know where we should be. And if we lose communication with them, they know where we're and exactly which way we're going to go. And so we were at 35,000 feet. And there was about a 20-mile separation between, there was three aircraft. There was a United aircraft in the lead, and then about 20 miles behind him was a Delta plane, and then about 20 miles behind him was my plane. And the air traffic controller came on and said, United, whatever his call sign was, we'll say 123, you have traffic 12 o'clock, which means straight ahead. Opposite direction, meaning he's coming the other way, at a very high rate of speed. So look for him. So the United guy looks and clicks the mic and says, I don't see anything. And the guy says, well, he's past you now. So then he says the same thing. Now only a few seconds have passed, and the Delta guy is just kind of silent for 2 or 3 seconds. They're obviously looking out the window. The controller comes back and says, oh, never mind, he's already passed you. And he tells us the same information. And so we're frantically looking out there to make sure there's nothing, we're going to be in conflict with. And he says, oh, you're clear of the traffic. So I asked him, I said, how fast was he going? And he replied back that, I don't know. He says, I've never seen anything that fast on my radar screen ever. He was just like stunned. And this was mid-90s, and there was a lot of UFO sightings that were going on around Mexico City and in Mexico during that time frame. A lot of photographs and reported by reliable people. So, I thought about that a lot later, and I thought, well, was it a UFO? Maybe. I just don't know. And then the thought crossed my mind was, could it have been something else like a military spy plane? And maybe. An SR-71 was still flying at the time, and they can fly at like Mach plus. Now that's about 2,500 miles an hour, but that would mean they would cover about 3/4 of a mile every second. The way that he called out that traffic to us, that whatever went past us, it traveled 60 miles in about 10 or 15 seconds. So that means it had to be doing something like Mach 25 or 30. Which would be like 20,000 miles an hour. And I don't know of any military plane that can do that. We've been working on what they call hypersonic aircraft for decades. The other thought that is possible that it could have been some deorbiting space debris. When the space shuttle Columbia disintegrated on re-entry to the atmosphere. When they entered the atmosphere, they usually were traveling about Mach 25 to 30. And if this was like a deorbiting satellite or some major component from space, that would have been trackable on the radar. and would have been going that kind of speed. But I never read about anything like that. I mean, that would be one explanation. But other than that, I would have thought we would have seen a bright glow in the sky, though, if that was the case. If we were looking, because it was a clear day, and we should have been able to see anything that was streaking through the sky. It would have been lit up like a bright light in the sky. So, and we didn't see anything. I mean, I even looked up, because in the military I had the experience. SR-71, I was flying a plane at 45,000 feet, and the traffic controller had called out this traffic. And when I finally found him, I could just barely see him. So he was probably, around 100,000 feet up, and just this little speck. And so I just don't know. But if it was, we see all these. We saw the other report on TV here just recently of the military pilots tracking on their radar something that was moving extremely fast just above the water. And they're going, what is that? It's like, hey, Fred, what is that? And it's like, I don't know, but it's going really fast. I don't know. It's a very interesting story to tell, though. And I still, have never been able to really resolve it.
Yes.
You can see some pretty weird, the same time frame as in Phoenix, that big triangular shape. It was later that summer. I happened to get up, my wife and I, really early in one morning, and we're out at daybreak. And as the sky comes up, looking to the east-southeast, we saw this just absolute magnificent display of rainbow colors in the sky. It's like, what is that? Well, what it turned out to be was they had done a launch from the White Sands Missile Test Range, and the vapor trail from that missile, the winds as it went up through the atmosphere had kind of sheared the vapor trail all around, and then the sunlight refracted that into just like a rainbow. And it was absolutely spectacular, but we thought this was like some UFO thing. So sometimes there can be a logical explanation for things, and I always, what I believe personally, I always want to present that as a possibility.
I always want to start there. I'm a show me kind of person too. I'm not, that's why, like with this particular talk with the pilots, and that they actually disclosed it, it made me think like I want to put it in a box. I want to put it in a comfort zone. And I bet when that one, on your one story where it flies by so fast, you said I think in 10 seconds, what was your feelings when you saw that go by? Did you go into fear at all, or just for a second, or,
Well, we actually never saw it. We actually never. Yeah, I kind of have to back up. Part of the training is being a pilot. If you're taking off and one of the engines explodes, you can't go, oh my God, what am I going to do? You're kind of trained
neutral.
To suppress
You're neutral.
Your natural human emotions. You suppress that, and you immediately revert to, well, what's my training for that? And you start executing checklists for an engine failure on takeoff, or an engine fire, or whatever the situation is. And so you kind of learn how to stop those emotions. So guy to be calling that out, I mean, the air traffic controller was much more upset about it than I think any of the three pilots, because we never saw anything, because we're making sure that there was nothing coming directly at us at our flight altitude. So, and like I say, we never saw anything. I mean, if you see something, that's when it gets kind of scary, if you have a near miss. And I mean, I've had
a high alert. You're on high alert.
Yeah.
High alert. High alert. It's like, what? because after flying all those thousands of hours, you're not expecting it, and then boom, there it is, and then you have to deal with it and be responsible for all of the people there too. So it's an interesting place you find yourself in those moments, you know, and there were only a few moments after all those years too. So it is really extraordinary. It is out of the ordinary. It's not like, oh, there's a UFO, Fred. Oh yeah, there's another one, you know, like that. It isn't like that. And do you get trained on how on identify flying objects, how you deal with that? Is there a certain protocol, or they just don't talk about it? Just doesn't exist.
I don't believe I ever heard in a classroom environment not to talk about anything we saw when we were flying. The only thing that my company said was, if you're involved in an incident, or if you witness an incident, or even if you're walking through the airport and a reporter comes up and asks you a question and you're standing there in your uniform, you're a representative of our company. And so you have to be really careful about what you say, because then what you say is going to be taken as a stance of the company. So the lawyers, you know, are very adamant that as pilots, you don't speak for the company. So you're not like a probable cause in an aircraft accident. That wouldn't be appropriate, because that's what the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, that's their job to determine what the thing is. In the first few minutes and hours and in days and weeks after a crash, there's so much wild speculation, because everybody wants an immediate answer, and sometimes there isn't one. It takes quite a bit of digging to find out the reason for an accident, and it's usually a culmination, a myriad of things that have to come into combination at just the right sequence in order for the accident to happen. It's rarely one. It's almost always a combination.
Yeah. Well, and also with this particular airline incident, this in February, he said when the captain notified the air traffic control, because he was concerned that the object could hit another aircraft, or, you know, so there was something definitely there. And would you feel that if it was a weather balloon? Would you feel that? Or is that, you know, would you feel like if you saw a weather balloon, would you, I guess because of the glare and the light, he was a little bit confused in it.
Well, yeah, he basically he couldn't say what it was, and so that would be the appropriate thing, especially if the air traffic controller, he wasn't seeing it on his radar. So a lot of times they can, even if you don't, normally we have what's called a transponder, and it sends out a discrete signal that he can identify your aircraft, your altitude, your flight number, and it's all displayed right on his screen. And all of the other aircraft that he's working, that's on his radar screen, he can see that. And then they can also pick up, a lot of times the radar will just pick up a radar return from an object. This is what happened down in Mexico. That aircraft controller actually saw this oncoming object. In this recent incident, he couldn't see the weather, whatever this was, and so the American guy was just concerned because he didn't want somebody else coming up behind. And I've seen those weather balloons up really at high altitude. They're huge. If you ran into one, I mean, the odds of that happening are just astronomically small. But if you did, it could be disastrous. If it went.
What size are they? Yeah, what size are they?
We're talking about.
My image is like a happy birthday balloon, or something like that.
No, we're talking about a balloon that might be 20 feet in diameter and 40 feet long, with an instrument package hanging on the bottom, off the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty big thing.
Are they usually silver, or do they glare? Do they glare like that, or are they dark color? You think they would paint them a dark color?
No, they're like a silvery color. Kind of a whitey silver color, and it was kind of the same. The DEA blimps, those were actually tethered to the ground. I mean, that's a long tether to it that went up, basically 4 miles up.
Wow.
Tethered from a site in New Mexico, the one that I saw all the time anyway, and they're even marked on our maps and stuff. And that would be dangerous if you ran into the cable.
Yeah. And you would see them on radar, right? Do you see those on radar?
Yeah, the air traffic controllers could see those. They would, if you were in that area and under their control, they would warn you about that. But they're also on the maps for people that are maybe flying a light airplane and they're just flying visual flight rules just kind of out there on their own. They have to be really careful because nobody's telling them anything. They're just on their own. So, but he was obviously concerned that to make sure that other aircraft approaching that area were aware that there's something there. He just wasn't willing to say what he thought it was. Somebody else chimed in and said it's a UFO. It could have been.
It could have been, huh? They couldn't not explain it away either. So it's there. It happened. The incident, and it went all across national news. I don't know if it was worldwide news or not. And this is happening, when you're in this kind of field, you think it happens all the time, right? Because people are up and they're looking for things. And I realize a lot of it can be explained away, but there is that probability that something could happen that is unexplainable. And for you, after how many hours of that you put flight time, you never really saw one, right? Maybe one or two things that you couldn't quite explain. It wasn't like every day. It wasn't a daily experience. So it still was extraordinary.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for me, the thing in Mexico was the only thing that I couldn't explain satisfactory in my mind, and that was almost 6 years as a military pilot and then 27 years as a commercial airline. That was the only time I really saw something that I have a logical explanation of what it was.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. I think we need to hear that. And with the UFO community, ET community, our community that we talk about it all the time. It's like part of our vocabulary. But for people that are out there maybe hearing this for the first time or just kind of getting more used to it in some ways, for this to go on, ABC News, and we talk about it, people's response to it, I think, was very different than way back in the 50s, right? So people are more acclimated. Would you say that's true, or do you have an opinion on that, or, of acclimate?
I think so. Yeah, I definitely. I mean, we've been exposed to so many things. You remember way back the book Fire in the Sky, and they made the movie about the guy that was abducted in Arizona. Well, that weekend, my wife and I was in the military then. We were backpacking not 20 miles away from where that happened. We get home and I pick up the Sunday paper and read this story. It's like, holy smokes, we were just there. And it kind of freaks you out. Read the book, and I mean, if you watch the TV show, it's just like, how do you explain everything that happened to this guy? A lot of people don't want to believe it, but it's just kind of a weird. I told my wife, well, if we were abducted, I don't remember it. we didn't wake up naked out, like a week later, like that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, that and just all of the that we see, whether X-Files on TV, and I want to believe, it's like we're kind of acclimated. I think we're more we'd be more accepting to believe it, and we know that our government, maybe with good intentions, sometimes lie to us. I saw that a lot in the intelligence community. Information was a protocol that's used to sway public opinion, even other countries' opinion about what's going on in the news. And a lot of times, what was really going on behind the scenes was not what we were reading in the newspapers or seeing on TV. And it was always such a shock to me that Ronald Reagan, when he was president, actually finally he admitted that we do that on a pretty regular basis to sway public opinion about certain things. And the intelligence community is incredibly towards their knowledge, and they don't want to let anything that's secret out, because a lot of times it can kind of disclose sources and methods to other countries that are not our friends. Even countries that are our friends, we keep some pretty high from. And what we used to materials that now they call, as everybody knows from the last election with Hillary's emails, special access programs. That's you think about it. I was in the intelligence community in the military. I had a top secret clearance with this expanded background investigation where they literally went back and talked to my grade school teachers to verify my
We'll be
character.
right back after this.
And before they would give me this secret clearance. But even having that, you can't read just anything you want. You have to, if it's compartmentalized,
a visiting Syrian diplomat reported today that their population is evolving rapidly and advancing into a fifth-dimensional consciousness.
The pages aren't all
they are seeking peace with all cosmic cultures, which may mean that the Earth will be asked to join the prestigious Galactic Federation of Light Alliances.
For that
Please join Debbie West and Michael Hathaway on Lost Knowledge.
If you are read into it,
Saturdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in Studio A.
What's going on in the world, what's going
on for the latest breaking news on the Star Visitors' peaceful contact and the ongoing project
I was involved in some spy satellite stuff, which we're talking about 1978.
Who are you?
The resolution
I am the
on
architect.
that satellite, which is
I created the Matrix. I've been waiting for you.
Miles up,
Why am I here? You are the eventuality of an anomaly which, despite my sincere efforts, I've been unable to eliminate from what is otherwise a harmony of mathematical precision, which has led you inexorably.
Well, thank you.
You haven't answered my question. The Matrix is older than you know, as you are undoubtedly gathering the anomaly is systemic,
we're just about ready
creating
to
fluctuations in even the most simplistic equation.
I'm sorry.
Choice.
Can you hold that? We're just about ready to go to break, Dean.
Right here at
I'm having a hard time
RevolutionRadioFreedomSlips.com. Be here Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time
can you
for
hold that?
Private Eye
Thank you
Matrix
so
Revealed
much for
with
that. And
Monique
after the break, we will be talking about the last chapter of your book, right?
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically autonomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday at 1700 hours Pacific Time, that's 8 p.m. Eastern, No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
This is Thomas, a.k.a. a Mad Painter. I'd like you to join me Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Open Canvas. Don't forget to bring an open mind.
Yes, folks, that's right. Bring an open mind to an open canvas. Again, that is Monday nights, 10 p.m. Eastern. UFOs to government corruption. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting the danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution. Radio.
Hello, this is Maggie Rose McGrath of The Concord Show.
And co-host Marine Corps Map, coming to you on Monday and Tuesdays in Studio A, noon to 2 Eastern.
And Studio B on Wednesday nights, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern, with educational, instructional, information, and situational updates, often with wonderful guests on the current landscape in the U.S. and overseas.
This is a go.
We are with you, side to side, and back to back.
Please join us on Monday through Wednesdays,
as well as other hosts and guests here on Revolution Radio.
We're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore. We said we're not gonna take it anymore. That's right, we're not gonna take it anymore.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hello and welcome back to the Cosmic Oracle Show. This is your host, Barbara Jean Lindsey. We have in the house this evening, we have our captain, retired captain, Dean Weber. Welcome back, Dean, to the show.
Thanks.
I'm sorry about that ending. I couldn't hear the coming through, and so I am having some technical difficulties, but we're getting through okay. So I do want to thank our listeners for being here this evening and for donating to keep us on the air, because we are a listener-supported radio station. And the way you can support us and keep us on the air and have these wonderful wisdom-filled people with lots of life experience, like Captain Dean Weber, is go to freedomslips.com. That's freedomslips.com. You'll find on the left a little icon that says funding, and you press that little arrow, and in that funding, it'll show you all the different ways that you can help keep us on the air. And so please find a way. They keep it simple and easy, and we really appreciate it in advance for all of your generosity in donating. So check it out and try it. We really do appreciate it. So we're back from the break, and we have Dean Weber here. And so, Dean, we were going to talk. I'm sorry I cut you off at the end there. Did you have any final thought on what you were saying? I was into it. I do apologize for just breaking your train of thought there.
No. It's a perfect time to end it and go to break. So, yeah. We'll move on to the next subject.
Okay. And so what would do you want? There's a couple things I'd like for our readers. Well, speaking of readers, I do want to endorse your book, and it's called 9/11, and it is an airline pilot's perspective, and our listeners can read it, and they can pick that up at Amazon.com. So would you like to take a few moments and tell us a little bit about your book and how you were inclined to write on a subject that is so intense, and it must have been intense to write it and to tell us. You have an extraordinary story. So would you mind sharing that first before we go into, I know you also, the last chapter of your book, the title of that, I had it all queued up and I can't get to it, is on the quantum
entanglement.
Quantum entanglement. So I do want to get to that before the end of the show. But before we do, if you also want to read Dean's book, you can go to Amazon.com, Dean Weber, and he also has an email account if you'd like to write to him and tell him about any of your stories, or if you feel like you'd like to communicate even further with Dean. And I had that also queued up. What is your email address that you could give to our listeners, Dean?
Certainly. It's Dean Weber, WEBER 2016 at gmail.com.
Okay. So that's Dean Weber 2016 at gmail.com. And so you can contact Captain Weber. No, I said it wrong.
Yeah, it's L as in Linda, just the letters L, D, and then D, or let me start over. Now I'm all flustered here. It's L D Weber 2016 at gmail.com. And if they go by the book, it's in the front of that as well. So
okay. So it's Dean L.D. Weber at wait. Okay, everybody.
No Dean on, just LD Weber 2016 at gmail.com. We should have everybody confused by now, shouldn't we?
Okay, LD Weber 2016 at gmail.com. I'll probably be saying that in my subconscious right before I go off to sleep tonight. But please contact Dean. He'd love to hear your stories, and you're going to find his story fascinating. So let's start with that. I mean, let's go with that, because I really had the honor of having you on the show 2 years ago when you were your book was just coming out, and so let's hear about this. If you would mind sharing that with our listeners, I know they'll love it as much as I did.
Okay, my pleasure. Yeah, during that time frame, 9/11, I was based in Los Angeles, and I flew the Boeing 757 and 767 airplanes for American Airlines. And a typical route of flight for me was from like Los Angeles to Boston, or Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., or Miami, and then we'd fly back to Los Angeles the next day. So these were the exact same routes and airplanes that the terrorists used on 9/11. And it could have very well been on one of my flights that fateful day, but I happened to be on vacation with my family in Washington, D.C., and actually I was standing across the street from the White House. American Airlines Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. And talk about a traumatic day that was, and trying to figure out what was happening. And so it was a very frightening experience, and it took us forever to get home because then the airlines were shut down for quite some time. We ended up driving. I live up in the Spokane, Washington area, northeastern Washington. So we had to drive Washington, D.C. in a rental car, drive from Washington, D.C. to Spokane. That's about 2,500 miles, and we did that in just a little over 3 days. So that's a lot of driving. And
wow.
That I talk about it a little bit in the book. I mean, was a very emotional time. I mean, everything on the radio was relating to 9/11. Every time you get off the freeway to go through some small town, it looked like the 4th of July in every little town and through the Midwest that you went to. I mean, it was like every storefront had a flag in it. You know, the cities put out all of their 4th of July decorations. It was just, it was such an emotional time. And then, of course, we finally get back home, and then 3 weeks later, when we finally started flying again, one of my first trips back, I was flying from Los Angeles to Chicago on the big wide-body 767, and I had range passenger decide that the pilots were terrorists, and we were going to crash the airplane into the Sears Tower when we got to Chicago. So he decided his mission was to kill us before we could do that with the airplane. So
holy crap! Wait a minute.
In 3 weeks of
Gene, I mean, oh my gosh! How did you handle that? I mean, that's an extreme story.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
Oh my God!
I just. You know, that's kind of like the story I was telling you about before. When the engine gets on fire, you can't go, "Oh my God, the engine's on fire." No, I was lucky enough. I get to do that. I had an ex-Marine that was my co-pilot, and in high school he had been a California state wrestling champion. And thank God that I had because he was able, along with some passengers, able to subdue this guy and get him out of the cockpit. But he actually broke the cockpit door, so we couldn't really lock it afterwards. But I had plenty of help from the passengers, I can tell you that. But there's some other really interesting tidbits on all of this stuff. As the big fracas was going on, one of the passengers leaped over the pile that's rolling around on the floor and lands right behind my in the cockpit. And I turn around and look at him, and it's a guy, probably mid-20s, early 30s, with a full beard. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this was all set up. This guy's a terrorist. Now he's going to kill me. And the guy must have read my eyes, what was going through my mind, but because he just looked at me and said, in perfect English, you know, he says, "I'm here to help." And it's like, well, then get this SOB out of my cockpit, you know. So then he dove in and joined the fray. But just momentarily, I thought, oh my God, this whole thing was set up so this guy could get into the cockpit to get to us. But anyway, and so then we get, we on the descent into Chicago. Of course, we had told them that somebody had, broke down the cockpit door, and of course they don't know then, are pilots flying it or are terrorists flying it?
Right.
Jets out of the Madison Air National Guard, some F-16s, and later it turned out I happened to get to talk to the major that was leading that two-ship of F-16s, because I'd flown with a co-pilot that was in that unit. And he said, hey, you want to talk to him? And when I did, they had came up unbeknownst to us behind us and were kind of scouting around to see how we were flying the airplane, because the terrorists on 9/11 really handled the airplane really roughly. They just weren't that skilled at flying the airplane. And so they were looking real careful, but they followed us all the way down to real low altitude. And then they decided that we were okay, so then they went around us. And just before that, I got a cockpit warning saying I had a traffic collision alert. And we're supposed to follow those commands, and the command from the computer told me to climb, and the major told me later, well, it's a good thing you didn't, because we would have shot you down. Said we got authorization from from our commander to the head of NORAD to the White House. We were armed, and we were not to let you get to the Sears Tower or where downtown Chicago. We would have shot you down on the airport if you would have started a go around. It's like, oh my God. So that just added to all of that, and of course it forms the combination. I think with 9/11 and then this happening, I definitely had some PTSD, and actually talked to a professional somewhat for a few visits and stuff, and I thought I was okay. But I actually, all these years went by, I don't think I was really okay until I wrote the book. Once I was able to put it all out on paper and really go through all of the emotions of what had happened and how it affected me, how it affected all my family. I wasn't really able to put that to bed until I really could write that all down. Mm-hmm. It was very helpful. So Ronnie Renee really helped me there too. Mm-hmm. Editing my book.
Well, yeah, and so again, how this incident was how long after the 9/11 incident?
This was only 3 weeks. So this was on October 8th, and so this was just less than a month.
A month.
Yeah.
So everyone was on high alert. There was still that fear there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I don't think most in your audience, people didn't know. The airplanes weren't protected yet. We didn't have the new cockpit doors. We didn't have anything. We just had we did these extensive briefings, and if we suspected anything, just like this guy, we'd had a little bit of information that came from his dad who was traveling with him that said he was afraid this guy might do something. And so we had recruited some passengers for help, and it's like, well, he'll never get past us. Well, I guess you don't know how motivated some people can get, because this guy was like 30 years old, 6'1", maybe 200 pounds. And, he came from the middle of the airplane on a wide body airplane. He's about 25 rows back. And if you went 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, he hit the cockpit door that fast. He went by before they even realized what was going on.
Wow.
If we would have had air marshals on board, they would have shot him, but they would have got him before he got to the door. But this guy, he blasted the doors were originally crashed. Rescue people could get into the cockpit to rescue you. So the door was really only meant to keep you from mistaking the cockpit for the lavatory door, or this right adjacent to it. So it only.
That's how naive we were, right? That's how naive we were.
Yeah, a good shoulder into the door, about 60 to 80 pounds of force. That was all that was required to break the lock on the door at the time. Now that's a titanium frame with Kevlar panels. Even the IP pole, they tested it point blank with a 45 caliber rifle. Won't shatter the eyepiece to look out from the cockpit to the cabin of the airplane. That's how stout the door is now. But they're pricey too. They're around $35,000 for each one of those doors. That's why the airlines had to modify thousands of.
Yeah, and they're able to get you out okay, though, right? Or is it like part of your work, like you're stuck there?
Well, no, there's certain. I basically can't go into all the details, but there's a code that can be input on a panel in the back that the flight attendants can access, or the fire people to ask to unlock the door. And unless you deny it from the inside, then the door will unlock. But they have to know the right code, and the flight attendants could give that to them. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or they could access through the cockpit windows. Yeah. Yeah.
That's pretty extreme, Dean. Yeah. That is extreme.
Yeah.
Wow, it's intense.
Yeah, it made a very intense story and to relate to people, and I try to intertwine some other stuff. It's like to try to explain what goes on in the cockpit. Like when you're sitting in the airplane at the gate before you push back and they start up the engines and then taxi out, what's really going on in the cockpit, and what do the pilots do to get prepared for the flight? What all information do they have to look at, and how long do they have to be there before the flight is scheduled to depart, and what all is going on, and just kind of what's happening in the cockpit. I think it gives people a pretty good feeling for, what we do up there. So
yeah, I don't think
it was.
Well, most of us don't have a clue, right? We just take all that for granted, and that everything's secure and that it's handled. And I don't ever think about it. I fly quite a bit. I've never really thought about it, And so it's good that somebody's thinking about it for our safety. And so now it's secure.
The other, the interesting thing was like looking at, and it could be really boring. I don't know if you've ever seen the 9/11 Commission book. It's like, I don't know, 900 pages, and it's the most dry, boring material that you could possibly read. But when I went through and gleaned out a lot of information from that to include into, how did 9/11 happen to start with? How did we let this happen? I mean, the most sophisticated intelligence community in the world, and we let this happen. These people were able to design this plan, and we were basically sitting ducks because the whole hijacking strategy had been predicated on what happened in the 70s with some of the PLO Middle East hijackings, where they wanted publicity more than anything else, or people hijacking a plane to go to Cuba or something like that. And always, if you cooperated with them, then at the end of the day, usually everybody pretty much survived. We had no idea that they were going to weaponize the airplane. They were going to hijack the airplane to use it as a weapon. Nobody considered that, and we should have.
Not a reality option.
Yeah, it was a lack of. I mean, the biggest thing that they said was that we needed to improve on was, kind of the imagination to allow these ideas of how an attack what an attack may look like, and so and supposedly these ideas are supposed to be able to flow freely up and down through the whole government bureaucracy. Well, you know how bureaucracies work. It's like you could talk to any business major. They talk to you about silos within any big company, whether you're talking about General Motors or American Airlines, there's these little silos that people build, and they want to hold their information. They don't want to let anybody else see their information. And the bureaucracies work the same way. So it's really difficult to penetrate through that. And they've tried to fix that by reorganizing the whole intelligence community and to improve some of our intelligence, equipment and stuff. And there's been a vast improvement in that post 9/11. But, unfortunately, the policies of the government should be committed to a coherent policy and strategy. And right now we seem to be kind of politicizing it's kind of a mismatch, mishmash, the policies, and it seems to be more politically driven, from one side or the other. But the whole idea is that we have a free flow of ideas up and down the whole chain of command to ensure that we're all on the same page. So some field agent that, for example, they give flight training to one of the terrorists. He tried to tell his FBI office something's not right here. This guy wants to go fly the simulator, but he doesn't want to learn how to land it. It's like something's fishy here, But he just got blown off. Oh, you don't know what you're talking. And that's what they were concerned. They wanted to be able to take over the airplane in flight and then fly the airplane, get it to their destination, and hit a building. And they weren't planning on landing, so they didn't want to waste their time. So, yeah.
And you go over these sorts of different segues about 9/11 in your book, right? And
absolutely.
Yeah, and give your
hopefully, I tried not to get political one side or the other, left or right, or whatever. I just try to put the facts out there as to what even after 9/11, the whole security protocol. I could give you a simple little example. Is that at your home base, where you go park your car in the parking lot, I can get on a bus and bypass security, and go right into our operations area at my base. But if I'm on a trip and I fly to New York, when I come back to the airport the next morning, I would have to go through security just like every other passenger would. Even though I have all the credentials, I have the uniform, all my IDs, everything, they still make you do that because the FAA we don't want passengers to see that we're giving you guys preferential treatment, but they understand that if they made you do it at the home base and all of the airline employees had to go through security out in front, they would have to double the TSA staff. So see, they make some decisions based on financial restrictions and not based on true security reasons. So yeah, because we used to do that all the time. We bypass security altogether. And before the mid 80s, I flew with a lot of guys that carried guns back then when we really weren't supposed to, but nobody was checking us. So a lot of guys did. And if guys would have been armed, now they can be a flight deck officer armed. Now if somebody tried to get you with a box cutter, they'd be bringing a knife to a gunfight. It'd be a whole different thing.
Scenario.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, it's.
So you got out just in time, Dean. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I guess so. I escaped, but there are some interesting things. Do you want to talk a little bit about the last part of the book, the quantum entanglement?
I do, and part of it I was able to pull it up in it. And why did you include a chapter on quantum entanglement in your book about 9/11, Dean?
Well, what struck me was I had been exposed to through this group. It's called HeartMath organization, and their website is heartmath.org, and they have a kind of a research study group there that's called the Global Coherence Initiative. And I had read this information that they had gleaned information about the Earth magnetic field, and they tried to correlate it to different events, whether it was natural disasters, typhoons, earthquakes, volcanoes. And somebody stumbled across the data for 9/11. And right at the time that 9/11 happened, within a few minutes, there was a huge spike in the geomagnetic field around the Earth, and also in the ionosphere, which is basically where all the ionized particles, where you get auroras and stuff. Those fields spiked right during 9/11. So it's like, okay, what can we say about this?
Well, it was around the whole Earth, so.
Yeah.
The whole entire Earth.
And so they're looking, primarily they gleaned this data from the two, whether it's called the GEOS satellite, geological, GEOS is the acronym. Anyway, it's the weather satellites, basically, but they also measure the magnetic field. And there's one that sits up over the West Coast and one that sits over the East Coast. And that's primarily where they gathered this data. And, excuse me here. The reason why I included it was because they showed this connection to 9/11. So then I started looking into this whole idea of quantum entanglement. Mm-hmm. And, most of us, or many of us, believe that all people and things in the universe are connected both spiritually and emotionally. And we've all heard the thing that, butterfly flaps its wings, Japan and a hurricane forms in the Gulf of Mexico. Or we've heard stories about twins knowing exactly when something happened to their other twin that they were separated from, or a mother that knew something happened to her child, even if they were on the other side of the planet. Instantly knew that there's something that happens, a major thing had happened. And so this connectivity to the world around us, they were trying to, is there any proof that this exists? And we can go clear back to Isaac Newton when he developed his Newtonian principles about the motion of planets and around the sun and whatnot, and he derived these formulas that you can calculate the motions of planets. And that worked really good for like 250 years. And then Einstein came along and his general theory of relativity, when they discovered that there were these subatomic particles, one of the things that they found was if you take certain subatomic particles that are paired, and you split the pair apart and separate them by a vast distance, that when you do something to the one particle, the other one instantly reacts. I mean, like 1,000 times faster than even the speed of light get there. And so, like Einstein, it freaked him out. He didn't like it at all because he thought nothing could go faster than the speed of sound, the speed of light. So he called it spooky action at a distance. I like that. But it invented the whole science of quantum mechanics. Well, then one of the other things that was really troubling to astronomers or cosmologists was when you look at the motion of stars in a galaxy, like the Milky Way is a pinwheel-shaped galaxy, and eon after eon, it maintains that same shape, and it shouldn't, because all the stars are being driven by the black hole at the center of the galaxy, and those stars should deform the shape of the galaxy, but they stay in the same shape. So the only thing that they could come to was there was all this what they call dark matter, which filled up all of the space that we can't see anything in, that looks black to us. And that's what they said was cause the stars to maintain that structure. And so they called that quantum entanglement. They coined that term, these scientists. And so now after that, people say, so what if the stars are entangled with the center of the galaxy, and subatomic particles entangled on a micro level, then what about do we have entanglement at the human or Earth size level? Mm-hmm. So that's when the smart math people they looked at the data and they decided that the overarching hypothesis of the Global Clearance Initiative is that all living systems are interconnected at an energetic level and communicate with one another via biological fields, and that humans are affected by planetary energetic fields, but conversely, the Earth's energetic systems are also influenced and act as a carrier for the collective human emotions and consciousness of both positive and negative. So their hypothesis is if we could get large numbers of people that would emit positive harmonic thoughts, that we can actually change the structure of the Earth and how people interact with it and how the Earth interacts with us.
Okay, can you say that again? I think that's really important for people to hear what you just said. Can you say that once more? You know, like when they hear the truth and then you have an aha moment. I think this is important work. Can you say that one more time, please?
Sure. It says the Global Coherence Initiative says that we are indeed connected by entanglement to everyone and everything on the planet. Everything. And the planet is connected with us. When we can send out energy to the planet can send back energy to our energy fields. What people don't realize is when they look at the energy levels that are typically in the past, we always thought about brain waves, and we know that's an electrical thing. Well, the heart produces an energy field that's about 100 times more powerful than the brain waves. and what they have done is
I love
they have
that.
a little machine.
Makes me happy.
that you can get, that you actually put this little clip on your ear, and it senses your pulse and all that stuff through your earlobe. And during this application, they have you concentrate on certain things, positive things like holding a little puppy, or holding a baby, and or a little bunny rabbits or something like that, and you can kind of see how your energy level changes and becomes very instead of being erratic. Before you start doing these thoughts in your brain, you look and the waves are really jagged that are on the screen, and then the more positive things that you can think about, that levels that out. It's like a form of meditation. In fact, a lot of people are using it as a meditation technique for relaxation and stress release, because then it forces your body to emit positive energy that we all know we're surrounded by, the physical body and the emotional body and the spiritual body, and so there's that energy field that around us. I know a lot of people that can read auras around people. I can't read the auras. I can see auras around trees and stuff, but I can't see them around people very well. But
hey, that's a good step though, really around the trees. It comes and goes. I can always see it around birds. That's how I can always see it. And then if someone is standing behind a white wall, and if you tilt your head just a tad and change your perspective, you can see the auric field. It just takes practice.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I used to do a lot more, but yeah, it's very interesting. And I've known a lot of people that are very good at using that to see holes or breaks in your aura around you that indicates you have a serious physical problem. I mean, you have a dis-ease. I know some people that probably can say that their lives were saved by getting that information given to them.
Yeah, we used to do classes where we would rub our hands together, and you have healing chakras in your hands, and you rub them together to get really hot, and then you would stand in front of someone about 18 inches away. You could start about 3 feet away with your hands up and walk towards that person, and you will definitely feel that energetic field there. And if you run your hands around it, you can feel where it has holes in it or it has something in it, and you can then ask and receive the energy to fill in that hole and give an aura healing, is what we call them. And it's really good for your pets too, if is to just go up to them and with an intention and then put your hands just above them, and you can feel their aura field there. And you get, again, it's something that takes practice, but it's one of our inherent abilities to have this awareness so we can heal ourselves, right, and each other.
Absolutely. My wife is a Reiki master. I mean, she's really good at doing the energy field.
Yeah.
Really good friend. She's retired now, but she was a chiropractor. But she was also actually probably led us into this whole spiritual part of ourselves. And people didn't realize when they came in that half the time it wasn't the physical manipulation she was doing with them. She was adjusting their auric field around. They had no idea because they're laying face down and they couldn't see that she was moving her hands and she wasn't even touching them. But yeah, it's interesting science for sure.
It is.
But, yeah,
well, and to have science. I'm saying to have science then go ahead and affirm something that healers have known for quite a while, or spiritual. We just couldn't put it into words, right? But to have spirit and science meet, I love that. And you write it beautifully in this chapter. I was able to go over it some. So, and you were going to say, Dean?
Well, I was just going to remind people, just go to heartmath.org, and then you can also link to the Global Coherence Initiative from that. But the main website will give you a lot of information about the HeartMath people, and you can access their research, and a lot of it is really highly sophisticated scientific research, and so it's not just somebody writing off the top of their head. They're using scientific methods to prove this stuff. So it's a very interesting thing. And just to add, anybody interested in the book, the easiest way to find it on Amazon is just type in on the search bar Dean Weber and then 9/11. And that'll bring my book right up to the top there. You get it in both Kindle or the paperback version.
Yeah, and that's Weber, WEBER. 1B.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so when with the quantum entanglement, it took me a minute. With the quantum entanglement and with reference to 9/11 and 9/11, and people felt that fear at such a spike, as proven by the heartmath.org, then also let's find the solution to that too, right? And that is, if we feel that at such a level, then we can also, like you said, do amazing. The possibilities are unlimited to what we can heal with a group consciousness effort.
Exactly. I mean, that's their premise. That's their goal. And they have set up, and not just using now. They're not just using the government weather satellites. They have set up ground-based stations around the globe that they can get more accurate and more timely data readings, and they're really trying to set up times where they'll ask people, like between 9 and 11 a.m. on Pacific Daylight Time, if you're willing to sit down and log on to their website and do this positive thinking that to see if they can actually change the energy levels, because their premise is if we could learn how to do this better, we could literally save ourselves and save the planet. We'd be able to avert, because they're claiming that the Mother Earth sometimes gets overloaded, and so there's some cleansing that has to take place in order for her to be okay, and that maybe we can affect her energy field. That would be wonderful, and if we could prevent like a 9/11 from ever even happening, if we could send out the right vibes around the world.
And so our listeners, if they do like a meditation technique, let's say daily, I read on the heartmath.org underneath the introductory heart coherence technique that even if you just do 5 minutes a day, right, to help build this personal coherence up, and it just takes just 5 minutes, and you could just, hey, give 5 minutes to Mother Earth, if we all would do that. I know we do it in prayer work, a lot of us, but this is also something that is a very pragmatic thing that you can do that really has been proven that it does work.
Yeah, and the best thing is you're promoting helping the planet and other people, but it's also making you more coherent and more relaxed and a better person too. So, what more could you ask for, huh?
Yeah. And what I like there's a quote on their website where it says, know that compassion for others is never wasted. It just has its own timing and higher discernment in how it plays out. That's from Dr. Childre. So, and that's true. So when you're doing this, you offer it up to its highest creativity, right? And who knows where that's going to go? It is again unlimited.
Yeah. And once way most of us believe, and I think probably most of your listeners believe, is once we put an intention out there, it's out there, whether it's positive or negative. It's out in the universe, and so we want to make that. We want to make those thoughts and ideas and that energy that's going out to be as positive as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome. I just think it's awesome. And we talked earlier today, and you bought one of their machines. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and I got to say, I've been really busy with some personal stuff. I haven't been on there for a while, but yeah, this little machine that you buy, like say you clip it onto your ear, and then you connect up with their application, and then you can see a graph on there, so you can kind of practice doing this to maintain this real positive, coherent production of good energy that you're emitting out of, and it's really amazing how quickly you can learn to control. You can take that your kind of personal coherence from being real erratic to being real smooth and very a short amount of time. The first session that I ever used it was like, wow, this is so people can also look for that as well. One of the things that's available through HeartMath.
Yeah. Do you think it would be a tool that you could use? No. Hey, why not if it works, and if it's also, it seems like it could be a tool that could be used if you have post-traumatic stress syndrome, something like that, where you're warming up your heart.
Yeah. Absolutely, because you have a tendency, with PTSD. I mean, it's like somebody can say one word, or there's a certain sound, and I didn't really appreciate before this happened to me. Some of the soldiers coming back, what their experience, and when it happens, it's like you're immediately snapped to that time where the actual terror level was at the absolute max, and you have all of those feelings. And so until you can kind of learn to reframe that just when you hear that word or that sound, that, you know, for a lot of soldiers coming back, just a loud bang or something takes them right back. They're in combat and somebody's shooting to kill them. So, you know, to reframe that into, hey, this is something that happened to me, but it was in that past and it's not happening now. And until you can get to that point, and I couldn't get to that point really fully until I wrote the book and really looked at all my emotions and all these different things that had happened on 9/11 and then on the flight where the guy broke down the cockpit door, until I really delved in, you know, and wrote that all out. Was I able to finally go, yeah, this happened in 2001. It didn't happen in 2018. It's a nice feeling now that I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, you're more neutral to it now. But you had to spill your guts into a book and be vulnerable, okay? It's not an easy process to do.
Well, no, and it's hard for pilots to do that kind of stuff because we're not used to dealing. Pilots are used to stuffing their emotions. Like I said before, like when an emergency happens on an airplane, you go into the actions required to do whatever needs to be done in order to save the airplane and save your passengers and yourself, of course. But I mean, you're just trained to do that. And so it's hard to open up emotionally. You know,
well, you allow yourself to emote. You allow yourself to maybe look at it like later at home when you're safe and sound, or then you can fall apart, right? Yeah. I know that a lot of times during emergency, like say automobile accidents, the person that was in the accident that's helping everyone. How do I know this? Because I had that experience. I was helping everyone, and when we went to the hospital, I was the one that was in the worst shape. You know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. You know, and you never little things that can trigger. You know, I don't know whether did you ever watch the movie Sully, where you know Captain Sullenberger, he landed the airplane on the Hudson River, and in the movie Tom Hanks played. Yeah. Well, there was one statement that he made when he got off, and this really triggered emotion in me. When he got off. Finally, they got all the passengers to shore and stuff, and he gets his cell phone, and he calls his wife, and he says, "Honey, I whatever you see on the news, I just want you to know that I'm okay. I can't talk right now, but I want you to know that I'm okay." And well, the thing that was so compelling for me was virtually the exact same words when I got to the gate in Chicago after we landed and finally got to the gate. We had this guy off the airplane and stuff. I had to call my wife. And those were verbatim the words that I had used when I called. So, yeah, I had a little bit of trouble when I was watching that the first time through the movie. It's like, holy smokes, that's exactly what I said. Yeah.
It's kind of like by calling your wife, you finally had some sense of back to a normal reality, or before, you know, reality.
Well, see, what I was afraid of is she's at home, and it was on every television station in the country for a while. You know, right after it happened on CNN, they were showing my airplane as it landed because she actually recorded that. Yeah, so that was kind of freaky. But you know, so I knew that she would know pretty soon that was me piloting that airplane, and of course they were talking about potential terrorists attacking the airplane and all that.
Yeah, well, because when you go through and when you go through something like this, your whole family goes through it. So like with 9/11, it's all the families that go through this as well. And like you were saying with the quantum entanglement, we're all connected with all of it. So thank you so much for coming on. And I want to leave the show with a quote from your book that you write. It's the Cockpit Invasion on October 2001. And your quote is, "Heroes are ordinary people who do extraordinary things. So I want to thank you for being on our show, Captain, and for doing the extraordinary things that takes courage and power. And you don't even know it was in you in some ways, but you showed who you really were, and you are a hero. And so we want to thank you for being on the show. And please, everyone, go to the Amazon.com and buy this amazing book, 9/11, An Airline Pilot's Perspective by Dean WEBER. And so I want to thank you again, Dean, for coming on at the last minute and so graciously having your presence on the Cosmic Oracle show this evening.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me back. I really enjoyed myself. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. And all of our listeners, again, I can't hear when the commercial's coming, but I know it's any minute now. I want to thank you for listening to the Cosmic Oracle Show. Have a great Easter, a happy Easter this weekend, and be with family and loved ones. And also you can find us at the Cosmic Oracle Show on Facebook. We also have a YouTube channel, the Cosmic Oracle on YouTube, and you can reach me at Barbara Jean Lindsey. That's BarbaraJeanLindsey.com, and send me a message. I'll do my best to get back to you. And I think we'll call that a show. I think we have 1 minute left, and again, thank you, Dean, and thank your wife for sharing you with us this evening too. And
sure. And tell everybody, don't forget, tell everybody that you love them every day. Never forget them.
Okay, that's true. Love everybody. That's the show's about that. We come from love. We are love. We return to love. That's the way it works. Woohoo!
Yep.
Okay. Don't be afraid, right?
Listen to Revolution Radio, Freedom Slips.
You know, and it's proven by hard path. So there you go. Okay. Thanks again. Bye, everybody. Thank you again. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. Any commercial advertising you may hear in this program is of the sole discretion and benefit of the host of whose program you are listening to. Revolution Radio does not endorse any commercial products, nor does it accept monetary compensation for on-air advertising of commercial products, nor will it ever. We are and shall remain 100% listener supported. Any product advertising on this program are considered used at buyer risk, and Revolution Radio shall not be held liable for any claims or damages received from any product advertised within this program. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Most guys freeze. That's your cerebral cortex looking for an answer it doesn't have.
See? Even your brain knows you're screwed.
The body's filling with adrenaline right now, whether you know it or not. Your heart's beating fast. It's getting a little harder to breathe. The neurobiological system is telling it to run, but your knees are too weak to move.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination, causing us to fear things that do not at present and may not ever exist. That is near insanity. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice. We are all telling ourselves a story.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. 100% listener-supported radio. Reporting to danger. Unafraid. Right here, where information never sleeps. Revolution. Radio.
Take a look around, kid. What do you see? Homes being foreclosed. People working 2-3 jobs just to put food on the table and still drowning in debt. Don't get me wrong. This country was founded on great ideals and principles. They've all been ruined by the banks. Open your eyes to the banks that are robbing you. You know who my favorite president was? Who? Thomas Jefferson. Because he saw all of this coming and tried to stop it. He fought the banks. JFK too, and they killed him for it. The banking institution.
Well, I'm just going to jump right in because apparently we're having a